Welcome back to a new episode of Out of the Bubble podcast. My name's Rachel Peru, and today I'm delighted to share another inspiring guest with you today. Jess Buchanan was kidnapped back in 2011 by Somalian pirates. She was held hostage for 93 days until the US Navy SEALs came and rescued her. She now has used those experiences and has gone on to inspire and really empower women all over the world to use their voices and share their stories. And I love the work that she's doing now to help lift other women up. She's also the New York Bestselling Times seller of the Impossible Odds book. She's writing her second book this year, which will be great to read. And I'm looking forward to finding more about her. I first met Jess whilst I was actually on her podcast. She co-hosts We Should Talk About That. The tables are turned, so it's going to be fun talking to Jess today. This is going to be a powerful one. Grab a coffee and enjoy. Welcome, Jess. It's so nice to talk with you again, second time around.
Yeah, I know. Thank you for having me. It's so exciting.
It really is. It's lovely to be able to interview you this time.
Yeah, I know. It's always like a different dynamic, right? When like the tables are turned and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
So we'll see how this goes.
So I've already done the introduction, but how do you introduce yourself to people?
Oh, well, I guess it's normal human nature to list your roles or your accomplishments. So I'm very typical in that regard. When I introduce myself, I talk about what I do, that I'm a survivor and I am a mother and a wife. I'm a New York Times bestselling author. I'm a podcast host. And I am I like to call myself a women's empowerment coach. I'm a nature lover. I am a spirit guide seeker. I'm a lot of different things. So, and I'm just a lover of life. So sorry, that's a lot of descriptions.
Well, no, but that's the umbrella that you sit under, and that's, that we're all made up of so many different parts, aren't we? And I think the fact that you have encompassed so many different aspects to your career now is really exciting. We have to touch on the situation that kind of, I suppose, created your change, really, and how you've developed from that. So, and it is, like you just said, we were just chatting now, it's 10-year anniversary. So, let's take it back to where this all began. How do you begin with that story? Because it's really quite incredible.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the things I forgot to mention is that I am actually a teacher by profession. So that's what I trained to do. And in 2006, I went to Africa. I went to school on the East Coast, US, and I ended up getting a student teaching position in Nairobi, Kenya at an international school. And it was awesome. And I loved everything about it. And they offered me a full-time position and I stayed. And so until I met my husband, who's at the time was a Swedish citizen working for a Swedish organization in Nairobi. I was just a grade school teacher, living my best life, traveling all over East Africa. And he and I met and we fell in love. And in 2009, I moved up to Hargeisa, Somaliland, where his work had taken him and relocated him. And I quit my job teaching and went up there so that we didn't have to be long distance, and ended up, teachers are funny that way because they can create work anywhere they go, right? Because there's always an opportunity somewhere. And so I started teaching English lessons to refugees that were living on our compound. And before I knew it, I had a whole dining room full of people wanting to learn English. And then that, rolled into working for the UN. And then eventually I got a position with the Danish Mining Group, which was the mine action unit of the Danish Refugee Council. And my job was to really develop their educational programs because we worked in armed violence reduction and community safety. And it was just really, really cool work. I traveled all over East Africa, South Sudan, Kenya, Rwanda, Somalia. And then in October 2011, I was called upon to do a staff training in the southern part, a town called Galkayo, like closer to like what most people would probably reference, like call up a frame of reference for Somalia. Not particularly the safest area in the world, but at the time, the UN and NGOs were working there, and expats weren't typically the target and all that stuff. And so even though I felt very strongly like I didn't want to go on this particular field mission, and I canceled it 2 times prior because of safety concerns, was really pressured, and I would even say bullied, into completing this mission and following up on it, because it was part of my portfolio by people that I was working with. And so I found myself in Galkayo, doing my staff training. And on the 3rd day, when we left the compound, we were apprehended at gunpoint by a group of armed, we weren't sure what they were, militia, Islamic terrorists, pirates, gangsters. We didn't know what they were at the time. We were driven out into the desert, and we were forced to participate in what I would call a mock execution, which we survived. And it was me and my Danish colleague, a gentleman named Paul, who were taken. And then subsequently, we were held out in the desert as captives by a group of Somali pirates for 93 days. We lived outside. We weren't ever taken to a shelter or a house or anything. We were starved. We were abused. We were tortured, until we were rescued on January 25th, 2012, by order of President Obama and by Special Forces, SEAL Team 6, U.S. Special Forces. And we were successfully rescued and then flown out of the desert and dropped back into the next stage of what I've always called surviving survival, which I feel like I've really closed the chapter on that decade. It's been 10 years now. And now working on the sequel.
Wow. I mean, and now it starts again, which is exciting, isn't it? And I'm sure people are going to be listening to this thinking, oh my God, I cannot imagine going through that. And I've listened to your story on several different platforms, and every time I hear it, I am still like, I cannot begin to comprehend how you recover from that. How hard has it been? Because you now go on and share your story and help and inspire so many other people, but how difficult was it to get past that?
Well, I would say I'm never going to be past it. It's not something that has an end. It's my journey.
Yeah. And
I think once I accepted that this was part of the tapestry of my life, and how often people will say, like, I'm not going to let X, Y, and Z define me, and I think I subscribed to that mindset for a while, and that was particularly difficult. That was a difficult place for me to heal in and to evolve in. And so I decided to look at it from the other side of it and say, what would happen if I did let this define me? And I let it connect the dots, and I let it frame the story and build a platform from which I can now move through the world and use my voice. And that for me opened up a lot of opportunity for connection and self-discovery and healing and growth.
Yeah.
Because then I could use it as a touchstone of like, and we all have those. And I don't believe in like comparative suffering. Like, everybody has survived something, is in the middle of surviving it, or will. Like, none of us escapes the human condition unscathed. And pain is pain, and hard is hard. And mine just happens to be a little bit more odd in terms of describing it, but it's the same as anything else anybody is trying to survive. And what if we use those experiences that we've survived or we're surviving as our touchstone to show us like how truly brave and strong and courageous we are. And so once I think flip that script that was going on in my head, it helped me pick myself back up and start walking again. And so I my next book that I'm currently working on is the working title is Deserts to Mountaintops, because I really feel like for me, it is literal. Like I've literally had to walk out of a desert, but it's so metaphorical and spiritual. Like, for me, like for all of us, like moving out of that desert through that wilderness up to the mountaintop that is whatever it is. For me, it's love, self-love. And so I guess that's my really long answer to say that it's ongoing.
Yeah.
And there are different phases and there are still bad days. But I know that I believe that I have what I'm going to need to get through those.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think that's a strength as well that you've really built up from this, isn't it? And you've almost become this is, I guess, become almost like your superpowers. You have been through all that, and you can now channel it into something really positive and something really good to help others.
Yeah, I hope that's my goal.
How difficult is it to recount this story all the time? Because obviously you've done amazing TED Talks, you've spoken all over the world. How difficult is it to keep telling that story? Does it always take you back to that place, or have you managed to kind of just have it as a story playing in your head and not trying to relate to it?
It depends on the audience. So just 2 days ago, I was at a military base and shared my perspective and my side of the story. And then I heard another perspective, another side of the story. And then actually sat down and went through a pretty, I guess, detailed Q&A. And that was intense and exhausting. It was exhausting to the point where I had to go back to my hotel and I just laid on my bed and stared at the ceiling for like an hour. Like I was so empty after that. But then, I could be in a group of women at a women's conference and like feel fired up after, like it just really depends on the energy and the group that I'm speaking to. And sometimes, sure, you learn how to compartmentalize so that you can get through it without crying, for instance. And it does get easier, it does get easier. And, I think, because what I do now in my day-to-day professional work too, is I help women figure out how to extract the lessons and the tools that they've learned in their experiences so that they can write about them, and then they can speak about them in a professional capacity. And when you're able to get to that place, when you're speaking from your scars and not your wounds, it does take on a different, I guess, like a different intention.
Yeah.
And so then it's a service and it's not so depleting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's amazing that you've had the courage to share it. And, I don't want to dwell on it because, like you said, it's the 10-year anniversary. And now you've got this exciting new chapter and you've been through that. And it's like another change again into more positive. Yeah. So, why is it, do you think, that women do struggle to stand up and share their story? Because I know you're like me, that we really believe that all women have a story to tell that they can share.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I just got chills, 100%. I think there's a lot of reasons. I think that we, first of all, don't think our story is very special. Somewhere we've internalized that we're not that unique. And who would listen to me? I think we get completely drowned by imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I've been one of those people before. Yeah. Like I've had to work through that.
Yeah.
I'm
still working through it.
Yeah. I mean, well, same, right? Like you could put me next to, I don't know, someone who's been through, comparatively speaking, something, who's been in captivity for 3 years. And then I would, I could do, but at the same time, it's like the constant practice of standing there, looking at yourself in the mirror when you're alone before you go out on stage, or if you're just getting out of the shower, and saying, you're a badass. Like, like I remember when I finally got it. I was driving home. It was in the middle of the day. I think I'd been like at some social thing, like maybe a luncheon or something. And it left me feeling, I felt excluded. I felt awkward. The whole like social interaction just felt very weird. And I left feeling badly about myself. And I remember catching a glimpse of myself in my rearview mirror in my car. And I looked at my aging face and I just said out loud, can we curse on here? Is that
you
okay?
can? Yeah, absolutely. Go for
it. Like, you're Jessica fucking Buchanan. And you survived 93 days of yada, 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 yada. And from then on, I was like, fuck that. No, we're not doing that anymore. And I think that we spend so much time and so much energy telling ourselves things that just aren't true because we're afraid to say what is true. We're afraid of what would happen if we stood in our own power and we actually said something good about ourselves. Like, we're so scared of what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, fear has got such a huge part to play in it, hasn't it? And I'm guessing from your experience, because you've been in such a fearful situation, is there anything now that you are really scared of? I'm guessing you've got this mentality that I'm not going to let anything stop me now. I'm just going to go for it.
I mean, kind of like it's taken me a while, like, and I'm not going to lie, like I get hung up, like I'm a middle-aged woman watching things happen to my body and my face and, hustling it, trying to, make money and build my businesses. And, of course there's I'm a mother. So of course my fears reside in like what could happen to my kids outside of my control and that. But if we're talking about like me and how I'm perceived in the world, I guess my fear would be that I am not perceived as authentic and true and with the intention that I really do put the effort forward. But I just have to like reside in that space of my intention is to be my truest self and to show up as authentically as I can. And I'm not for everybody. And that's a hard lesson to learn too, right? It is. To not force it. Like if you're just not somebody's cup of tea because they drink lattes, then that it's just like surrender, right? Surrender.
And I have to always check in with that, remind myself that some people I just don't gel with or connect with, and so it's the same for somebody with me, and that's absolutely fine, but it is hard to sit with sometimes.
It is because it can be a lonely space too, this seeking and striving for an authentic experience in this lifetime. I think it can often be it can be lonely, and it can feel a little ostracizing, and you can feel a little bit outside. I mean, and I used to always feel so outside of everything. Like people would find out what happened to me, like when my kids were little and I was out on the playground, and I live outside of Washington, DC. So it's very transient. So you'd be on the playground, you meet a new mom, they'd want to know, where'd you move from? Because no one's from here. And then you say Africa. Oh, what were you doing in Africa? And then there would be no way that I could get around what happened. And then as soon as I would say like just a brief overview, then they'd look at me like I grew 3 heads. And and then you just are like the freak mom on the playground, right? So I think you just have to decide, like, is it what's most important to you? And for me, not hiding and being my truest self and using my voice, knowing it and being able to hear it and follow it is more important to me than pretty much anything else.
And I think that's that key thing there, following it. It's trusting that gut instinct, isn't it? It's trusting those inner feelings. And as women, we've often been kind of forced lots of different information and opinions on how we should be running our lives, and then it's hard to break that cycle and to listen to your own natural instinct. How do we get past that? How do we encourage women to follow those?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because that's my life's
mission.
That's your it's almost expertise. Like we had that planned out.
Seamless.
Well, because listening to my intuition is really or not listening to my intuition is what got me kidnapped in the first place, right? I said I didn't want to go on this training. And the part of the story that I'm only now really like starting to unpack and starting to talk about is that October 25th, 2011, I woke up that morning in the guest house, and I had hardly slept all night long. I was drenched in sweat. I had nightmares all night long that we were being kidnapped.
Wow.
I like that pirates, like it was so extreme, right? Like Johnny Depp, Pirates of the Caribbean style nightmares. And I'm not like one of those people who prolifically dreams.
Yeah.
So it's significant if something like that happens to me. And they were like, you know, in my dreams, like trying to get into my room and banging on the doors. And like, I just tossed and turned all night. And when I got up out of bed, I walked to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, Jess, do you want to do this? I mean, I said that out loud to myself, and I knew the answer was no. Like, did I need any clear sign from the universe? Did my intuition need to give me any more red flags? Like literally, she was doing cartwheels inside my mind and inside my soul. And all I could think about was like what everybody was going to say. Like, what do I do? Do I go down there and tell Paul, like, hey, I have these nightmares all night long about pirates, so I'm not going to go. I'm going to hang out. Like, everything had been organized. The logistics had been, you know, organized for the convoy of vehicles, my staff, like all of this outside pressure, all of these outside voices. And it was the most defining moment of my life, because it was the moment that I abandoned myself.
Yeah.
I walked away from what I knew was true. I walked away from my own personal safety and security. I walked away from my voice. And I stepped through a corridor, like a doorway that led me into it changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
And I am lucky that I survived it.
Yeah.
Like beyond lucky that I survived it, because some women don't. And I'm, you know, this happens to everybody, but I feel very, very passionately led to speak to women about this part of my story, because it's just like about that outside pressure, like listening to it. I think it's Glennon Doyle who, there's this cool quote where she says she stopped asking people directions to places that they'd never been.
Yeah.
And I like, why do we do that? You know? And so now, okay, so that the end of that story is that I repressed those memories. Like I repressed that I had those nightmares. I didn't remember it. Even in the like following hours during the kidnapping and everything, because everything was so traumatizing. Until like 60 days into captivity. And it doesn't matter the details, they're boring. And somehow I got my hands on a Kindle. I had my work bag, it had a Kindle in it. The pirates let me have my Kindle for like a few short hours. It had two books on it. It had Freakonomics downloaded on it, and it had the King James version of the Bible, like the Holy Bible, because that's what comes on a Kindle apparently when you buy it.
Right.
And I grew up in a religious environment, but I was like not one to like sit there and read the Bible. But I thought, oh, this feels like a good time to do something like that, you know?
Yeah. If ever there was a time. Like,
I mean, if ever there's a time to really start praying, like
absolutely.
And it was like around Christmas. I had lost track of the days, but I knew it was around Christmas time. So I thought, let me read the Christmas story, right? And I'll read it in all of the Gospels. And I got to the part in one of the Gospels where Herod is after Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus because he wants to kill him. And Joseph has a dream that this is happening, a premonition. And so he heeds the warning and leaves, and they go somewhere else, and baby Jesus' life is spared. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my fucking God, he had a dream. And then it all came back to me that I'd had this dream.
Yeah.
And do you know where I was sitting when I had this like epiphany? I was sitting in a goat pen. I was literally sitting in a goat pen, and there was like a manger next to me like where the animals fed out of, because that was like the closest I got to like a structure to sit in. And I looked around me and I was like, okay, so here's the deal. Obviously, there is something out there. If you get me out of this thing alive, I promise you, I will make it my mission to ensure that I never ignore my intuition again.
Yeah.
And then that will be the gospel that I preach.
That's so powerful.
So that's what I'm on a mission to help women understand, that they can, first of all, you have to hear it.
Yeah.
You have to hear your own voice. You have to recognize the sound of it. And how do we do that? We have to get quiet. We have to spend time in our own company, and we have to spend time in solitude. And for me, like, that looks like meditation, it's journaling. I mean, all of these things, sometimes I feel like they're so cliche, but I'm dumbfounded when people don't do this.
No, I must admit, I started journaling through COVID, and it really has helped me. I write a gratitude diary every night. I set intentions in the morning. I journal whenever I have a notebook at the side of my bed, and it has massively helped.
Yes. I mean, it's so like easy, right? But that's the secret sauce.
Yeah.
Like when people ask me about work and like, how do you book speaking events and what do you do? And, blah, I'm like, all of that is peripheral. All of that is outside of our control. The work is inside. The work, like if you want to be a professional speaker, or you want to write a book, or you want to podcast, or you want to do all of these things, it doesn't matter who you know, how good you are on the technical side of things, whatever, how good of a writer you are. If you don't know what you're saying, and if you haven't connected to your voice, and how do you connect to your voice if you don't spend time? And I'm talking massive amounts of time here. And I get it. Like, my kids are still small. It's hard to find silence.
Yeah, and I think women feel guilty. I think women quite often feel guilty about taking time for themselves, don't they? It's like, we're not allowed, we're last on the list to have that time, and that's what we've got to shift.
I mean, if you want somebody to help you not feel guilty about that, look me up, because and I just came from coffee with a friend. She's got 4 kids. And we've been working through a lot of stuff with her in terms of like putting herself like back on the priority list. And I said, I love my kids like to the ends of the earth, but my world doesn't actually really revolve around them, because they're here with me for a short time, and I will do everything I need to do. And I love them, and I want them to feel loved. And I know I screw up, but really, like, I feel like my purpose is here to get to know myself.
Yeah.
So those, like, practically, right? Again, like, that's just taking the time. That's whatever it takes to get quiet. And I think we're afraid to get quiet because we're afraid of what our voice is going to say.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think, especially for me, the women that I talk to in midlife that go through this next transition of quite often their kids are moving on, the husband might have a different career, and they've got this time to start thinking. And I think people are scared of that because they don't know where it's going to take them, and they don't know what truths are going to come out in those thoughts.
Yeah, it's scary, but I think that it's scarier to think about filling your days with like just stuff.
Yeah.
And never really getting to know what it is you truly want, why you were put here. I mean, I believe everybody has a purpose, and maybe your purpose is just to heal yourself from generational trauma. Maybe your purpose is to start a nonprofit. Maybe your purpose is to spread body positivity. Like, maybe we all have a different purpose, and some of them are big, huge purpose, and some of them may not feel as big, huge, but they are absolutely why we've been put here. And so I think also, like, a big, huge piece of my finding my voice and getting familiar with it has been about exploration. And so over the past 10 years, I've done a lot of things, and I have had to like grow thick skin, because I know and I've talked to a couple of people about this, like from the outside, it probably looks like I'm just like manically like going from one thing to the other and I don't finish anything and whatever. But this is all a part of my process to see what lights me up, what sets my heart on fire.
Yeah.
Right. And I had a therapist tell me that one time, because I had this narrative. It's part of my personality too. Like I like to go where the action is. I like to have fun, like I want to feel alive, and that can be good and bad. But I've had this narrative that came from like my origin story, that I don't finish things. Like I start them, but I don't finish them, and blah, 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 all of this. And she said, what if we reframe it and say it like, maybe you're just like brave enough to keep trying new things.
Absolutely. I can so relate to that, Jess, because I have, from my 20s up until my 40s, I was exactly that person, and
yeah,
family, and even now they might still try and say it, but I just don't listen to it. But it will be,
yeah.
you've never finished anything, what are you going to try that for, because it's not going to work. And so then you start believing it, and actually it's not that at all. It's just because I had a thirst for knowledge and I wanted to experience things. And how do you know what you're going to find joy in if you don't try lots of different things? And it was all led to where I am now. It's so
yes.
It is about reframing.
Can you imagine if you hadn't like said yes to whatever?
Yeah.
That, I mean, you could have shut it all down.
Yeah.
And think about this whole part of yourself that you wouldn't have gotten to explore, and the platform that you have built, and what you're doing for women all over the world. Yeah. Like, I mean, I think part of that exploration, and maybe some naysayers would say, well, you're just letting yourself off the hook. I don't really care. Like, it's not just for me. It's so that I can be of service, so that I can find whatever it is that is my best and highest use, so that I can say what needs to be said to the person that needs to hear them. That's my prayer every morning when I sit in meditation is, universe, angels, spirit, like bring the people to me that need to hear what it is. Give me the words, bring the people to me, and then put me in the paths of people, that I need to hear. And so the more I explore, like for years, I studied herbalism really deeply. I mean, I was driving like 3 hours to another town to go to school. And I did this for like 2.5 years. And I don't practice it really much anymore, but I'm finding some of the principles are coming back in my spiritual practice, which is really nice and comforting and super fun to explore that in my current professional practices. And I'm sure people think that like I'm a flake because I spent all that time and that money, but it all kind of stacks full circle. It's just all a part of, it's just a thread, and you put those threads together and then you weave together this beautiful picture of you.
Yeah. So what's the beautiful picture of you in the future then? What's your kind of goals now? Because you're writing your books. So when will that be out?
Oh, well, it's my 2022 goal. So, right. I mean, I am calling it forth, but you know how it is. It's hard, and it takes commitment and time, and I'm probably about halfway through it. So we'll see how that goes. The next couple of months should be interesting. My podcast, we should talk about that I co-host with Jessica Kidwell. We just want to keep growing. We want to keep growing in our audience and the topics that we talk about. We largely talk about uncomfortable things that no one is talking about, but should. And hopefully we can start having live events again, because one of our common goals and something that's really important to me is community building. And, gathering together and building off of each other's experiences and energy is like, there's no replacement for that.
No, there isn't. That's what we've really missed this last couple of years, isn't it? I'm the same. Just that connection with people, just having that physical connection.
Yes. So we have some things in the works for the spring. Hopefully we can start doing that again. And really, like, I am looking to host retreats and workshops for women who are ready to tell their stories and really but they need help finding their voice.
Yeah.
And so I really want to work on empowering and supporting women as they explore and they get quiet, and to support them. And it often a very unfamiliar and somewhat scary. It can be a scary process to find your voice, figure out what you want to say, and then how you want to say it. So yeah, I think, that's 2022. I feel like I closed a book, not just a chapter in this last decade. It definitely feels like a book. And I read the last page yesterday. I shut it and I breathed a sigh of gratitude and relief.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because that was surviving survival. That was, and now I don't know what we're going to call this next book, but the sequel feels, the energy around it feels really good. And I feel more alive than I have in a very long time. And I am holding on to that feeling. Because I have some big goals to manifest. Yeah. I think there's a couple more books in me, and maybe another podcast and some courses, and all the things. Like the sky's the limit. I'm open.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, brilliant. Well, I can't wait to see your progress and when your next book comes out as well. So my last 4 questions that I ask all my guests: do you have a book that you kind of go to that really inspires you?
Oh my goodness, I love books so much. I would say most recently, a book that has really inspired me is called You Already Know by Helen Jacobs.
Right.
And she's a medium. She's an Australian psychic, but she writes a lot about intuition and how we already know what we know. And it's just, her work is transformational. And even if you're like not into that kind of thing, there's a lot that she writes about around purpose and just listening to the call of your own voice that I found really powerful.
Yeah, well, I'll have to look at that, because I'm the same as you. I just love books. I just like to
I like to listen to them.
Yeah.
And of course, maybe it wouldn't be the same for you because you have this lovely British accent, but she's got this gorgeous Australian accent. So I like listen to it when I'm like walking, and I feel like, oh my gosh, it feels very magical.
Yeah.
So
brilliant. And what about a piece of music or a song that always motivates you?
Oh, okay. So again, it's like phases, right? But if you are a Spotify subscriber,
yes,
there's a manifestation playlist, and it's just like amazing, badass women. It goes anywhere from like hardcore rap to like folksy indie pop and everything in between. And like, it is awesome. So just go to Spotify, put in manifestation, and the first song on the playlist is by I'm just gonna look it up because she's so
brilliant.
awesome.
Because I'll share this. I'll put this all in the links.
I'll send it to you. It's called Pretty Girl Magic, and it's Scorpio. Moonlight Scorpio is the first one. Don't let it scare you off. I think her song actually has been big on like Reels and TikTok and everything. And you'll probably recognize a lot of the songs from like social media and stuff, but man, it's like India Irie kind of like on steroids. Right.
Brilliant. I shall share that. Thank you so much. And what about somebody else that inspires you?
Oh gosh. People are amazing. Yeah. I would say right now, a lot of my clients inspire me. I am working with these women. One has survived academic mobbing. Another left an Orthodox Jewish community and family to save herself. Another one has an amputation from half of her pelvis, and her right leg have been amputated. Like the stories of these women and what they have survived and their outlooks on life. Like I will listen to the sessions that we've done and to taking notes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, if Beatrice can do it, then I can do it, And so I would say right now, I just feel very inspired by the people in my sphere. I feel very lucky.
Yeah.
And I'm very inspired by you too. I do have to say, I just love watching you on Instagram. Like you're just so gorgeous and so open and so just like inspirational.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That means a lot. And I think it's like you. I think it's just the fact that I finally found my voice. And I think it's just about being true to that. And that's actually really lovely. It's a lovely feeling to once you get there, isn't it?
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so worth all the work.
Yeah, it is. And my last question, because I'm really trying to encourage women to be more complimentary about themselves. How would you pay yourself a compliment?
Oh, what would I say? I would say, Jess, you're really interesting.
You certainly are. Yes. It's just been an absolute delight to talk to you. And I'm so grateful that you are here to be able to talk to us after everything you've been through. How can people find out how they can work with you, your podcast? How can people come and find you?
So I hang out on Instagram a lot. I have so much fun there. And I'm at Jessica C. Buchanan, just my name. My podcast is at We Stat Pod. And my group coaching is Project You Collective. And then if you wanted to work with me one-on-one, you could just DM me on Instagram, or you can check out my website, and that's jessbuchanan.com.
Brilliant. Well, I'll put all those links in the notes at the end as well. But it's been an absolute pleasure. And, I'm looking forward to seeing the book when it comes out, hopefully by the end of the year. And
me too.
Have a happy and healthy 2022, Jess.
Thanks so much, Rachel.
Pleasure. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Well, what a powerful episode. And I'm so grateful for Jess being so honest and sharing her story. And so much to think about in that episode, and lots of food for thought, I'm sure. But one thing that really struck me, that was a reminder to really follow your gut instinct and to listen to yourself, because at the end of the day, we are usually right. And I'm sure Jess's story and the way that she shared that will remind us all of that is so powerful. And I love the fact that she's going on now to help so many other women use their voice for good too. So fabulous to talk to. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I will be back next week with some more inspiration. But in the meantime, keep being fabulous.